Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's edition of the Triangle Area SQL Server User Groups Data Science and Business Intelligence subgroup. So we are going to have the first business intelligence heavy session, which is still actually pretty far into data science as well, given the topic. So without further ado, let me hand it straight over to you, Sanil.
All right, thank you, Kevin. That was a super quick introduction.
That's what I'm known for.
Uh, Thank you. So thank you guys for inviting me to speak at your user group. I'm excited to be here. And the topic that we are going to talk about today is text mining and sentiment analysis made easy using Power BI and Azure Cognitive Services. So I'm going to jump right into the presentation and the demo. This is going to be a demo heavy session. The last time I did this session was at the Parse Summit in Seattle in person. This is back when we used to have conferences in person. And so it's been over a year and a half since I last gave this talk. So I might be a little bit rusty, so be kind with me. I'll stop my camera and start sharing the content.
And as Sanil is sharing the screen, I do want to note, if you have any questions throughout this, please feel free to enter them in chat and I will interrupt and ask.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yep, coming through loud and clear.
Perfect. All right, so as I said, we are going to talk about text mining and sentiment analysis. And while the font made easy is in smaller font, the focus of this session is how to make these typical data engineering or data science activities easy for general users. I'm going to skip past some of this summit slides and go to the introduction section. So I am a senior data engineer. I work in the data engineering and analytics space at Worldwide Technology. It's based in St. Louis, Missouri. I have a keen interest in data science, and in the past, I have been a DBA, an application developer, a sysadmin, and I have worked with SQL Server, Oracle, Big Data, and cloud technologies. And recently, I added Docker and Kubernetes to the fun things that I have worked with. So it keeps evolving. I like to keep things exciting. So here are the 7 things that we are going to talk about today. First up, we are going to briefly discuss what is qualitative versus quantitative analysis when it comes to analyzing text data. Then we are going to briefly explore what are the text analytics APIs available in Azure Cognitive Services. Next, we are going to look into how to load your text data into Power BI and then extract key phrases and generate sentiment scores. Next, we will build some visualizations and dashboards in Power BI from the sentiment scores and key phrases that we extracted previously. And then we are going to talk about gaining some interesting insights, navigating through the dashboards and visualizations that we just created. And if we have some time, we are going to cover an interesting text analytics technique and visualization by embedding an R script in your Power BI. So I'm going to jump right into qualitative versus quantitative. So what is qualitative data? Qualitative data is typically the data that consists of words and narratives. So think of things like comments on Amazon.com, or if you guys have been lucky enough to take survey after surveys, some of those surveys have open-ended questions. The text data that you would input in those survey questions, that would be qualitative data. Think tweets, Facebook posts, so on and so forth. When it comes to qualitative data, the analysis of it is somewhat different than the techniques that you would use to analyze numbers. So you would want to extract key phrases, you might want to extract themes, you might want to generate topics out of your body of text, or you might want to explore what emotions are found in your body of text. You're trying to understand perceptions, and we already talked about a few examples. On the other hand, you have quantitative data. Quantitative data is numeric, so you can apply statistical techniques on top of it. You can aggregate it, you can slice and dice it. Some of the examples are dollar amounts, scores, ratings, so on and so forth. In this talk, I'm going to combine qualitative and quantitative techniques. So you can think of it like yin and yang. You can gain certain insights by doing qualitative analysis, and you can gain certain insights by doing quantitative analysis. A good example of qualitative analysis on text would be generating word cloud, or running a topic modeling algorithm to extract topics in the body of text, or running an emotion classification algorithm to identify what emotions are found in your body of text. You can also generate sentiment scores from that body of text, and that sentiment score is a number. So once you have a number, you can now start applying statistical techniques or numerical analysis on top of that data. So throughout this demo, throughout this talk, we are going to look at both of these techniques. Any questions so far?
None so far.
All right. So we are going to go through this talk using a real life example. My company runs the IT shop in an agile fashion, and most agile teams have a sprint retro. On top of this sprint retro, my company does a quarterly team health survey. And in that team health survey, they ask just one open ended question: how do you feel about your team's health in this quarter? So I have taken that survey data, de identified it, of course, and I have used that to build this demo. This is also a real life application in my company. We use these NLP techniques for analyzing our company's team health data quarter after quarter for the past several years. We have been doing this. So in this particular demo, we have a data set with 300 total responses that spans across 9 IT teams, 3 managers, and 4 quarters. And the raw data is in Excel. So what are we going to use to analyze this data? We are going to use Azure Cognitive Services. You might ask, why Azure Cognitive Services? So there are NLP algorithms available in R, in Python, and yes, you can easily do that. But remember, the topic is text mining and sentiment analysis made easy, right? And it doesn't just mean made easy for developers. The goal is to make this easy for anyone to do with Power BI, mostly in a self-service manner. So you need not have technical skills to be a great developer, kind of technical skills to do the things that I'm going to show you. So that's the background about why we will want to use Azure Cognitive Services. So what is Azure Cognitive Services? It's a collection of machine learning and AI algorithms in the cloud. There are algorithms related to vision, speech, search, decision, and so many more things that they keep adding almost on a daily basis, it seems. We are going to focus on the language section of it. In language, they have text analytics, they have text translator, and a few more. But our focus is going to be text analytics APIs. With the text analytics APIs, I'm going to focus on key phrases and sentiment scores. You can also use the API features for language detection, for named entity detection. There are also now API features available to identify if your body of text contains PII information as well. And I would say if you haven't tried it yet, just take it for a spin. It's super fun to use. So with this, I'm going to switch over to my browser and log into the Azure portal and show you how to create a text analytics service. Before I jump into that demo, are there any questions or is there anything anyone would like to share or talk about?
So while you're switching over, any questions from our illustrious chat? Sounds like a no so far.
All right. Then let's jump into the next section of the demo. I do encourage folks to ask questions. Don't feel bad about interrupting. I enjoy an engaging back and forth conversation rather than just a one-sided demo or a one-sided lecture. So feel free to stop me with your questions anytime. So what you see on my screen is Azure Portal. And
So,
I am
Sanil, would
going
you
to,
be able to zoom in a bit?
oh, yes. What happened? There you
That
go.
looks great.
This
Thank you.
isn't, sorry, I was trying to use my MacBook gestures and almost forgot that I'm on my Windows laptop. Okay, so this is the Azure dashboard. And to create a new resource, you simply go to this section on the top left and create a new resource. The resource that we are going to create is under the AI and machine learning category. So let's click on that. And we talked about the fact that we are going to create a text analytics resource. So let's click on text analytics. So I have my subscription over here and I have a resource group over here. So I am simply going to use my existing resource group. You're welcome to create your own resource group as well. I am on the West Coast, so I am going to use the West US region. And let's call this try, oops, I pass demo. And for the pricing tier, I'm going to create the free tier. I don't really want to add any tags to this, so I am simply going to click the review plus create button. And this is going to take care of creating those resources for us. I'm not going to wait. Oh, well, that was really good. That was really quick. So it has created those resources for us. So let's go into the resources. All right. So you will notice that the resources got created, and there is a little helpful feature over here that tells you how you can go ahead with starting to use these resources. So once you create your resources, there are two things that you would want to keep for future use. One is the API key, and the other one is the API endpoint. So if you go into the overview section, you will see over here, this is your API endpoint, and you want to save that for using in your Power BI functions. And the second thing that you would want to save is go into the keys and endpoints section and save these keys. So if you hit the show keys button, it's going to show you those keys in clear text. Everyone good so far? If you guys are following along with the demo, um, uh, let me know if you run into any issues.
Looking good so far.
All right. So assuming you guys have your endpoints and access keys saved, I'm going to go back to the slides and let's see what are we going to do next. So we created our text analytics service in Azure, and we made a note of the endpoint and a note of the API key. Now we are going to launch Power BI and load our data into Power BI Desktop. So let me switch over to Power BI, and I'm also going to open the Excel file so you guys can see what the data looks like. This is our data set. It's pretty simple. We only have 4 columns. The first column is period. Then we have the manager, the theme, and the actual text response. And this is where I have de-identified the manager names, the theme names, and taken out any sensitive information from the response text. But outside of that, this is the real survey data. Now I'm showing the Power BI screen. Kevin, is the Power BI screen fairly visible?
So the center portion, add data to your report, I think is large enough. The rest of it, a little tough to see. I'm going to do my
Okay.
part by going full screen, but yeah, it's a little hard to read.
All right. Let's see if there is anything I can do to help. It looks like, unfortunately, there isn't a lot that I can do to help with the visibility of this, but that's a lesson learned for me for the next online presentation. I'm going to get tools like Zoom It. So I will talk through this, but feel free to stop stop me if you have any questions. So
Okay.
right in the center of the screen, you can see there is a big bold button to import data from Excel. Since our raw data set is an Excel file, we are simply going to click this big bold button for importing data from Excel. And let's navigate to our Excel file. So I keep all of my demo Excel files over here in C drive demo. So Power BI is now trying to load that Excel file. Depending on how new or old your machine is, it might take a few seconds. My machine is fairly old, so it's taking its own sweet time. All right, so you can see the preview here. The preview looks pretty much like the sheets, like the Excel sheet that I was showing you earlier. So we are going to do a little bit of transformation because I don't want these heading columns to show up as data. So clicking the transform button, and that's going to open up the query editor. And of course, it opened up the query editor on my second monitor. So let me bring that over. Right, so I'm just going to remove this top row. So my headings don't become a part of the data. And oh, sorry, I should not have done that. So this is one good thing about Power BI, that if you realize that you have made some mistake, you can simply remove the step that you had applied. So I'm going to remove that step, and my heading columns are back here, and I'm going to say used first rows as header. And now you notice my first row has become the header of this data frame. So that's pretty much all that I wanted to do in terms of the transformation. So you can simply close and apply. Again, depending on how new or old your machine is, this might take a few seconds. This is a fairly small data set, only 300 rows, so I don't expect it to run for too long. So the data set is now loaded. And you can see it's pretty much your Excel spreadsheet. So the next thing that we want to do is to create the functions that we are going to use to invoke the Azure Cognitive Services APIs. So we are going to go over into the Get Data section and navigate down to blank query. Once you click that, it's going to open the Power Query Editor mode. And this little text box is where you can enter your query text. So I'm going to open my notepad here, and you will notice that I have a PowerM function. And this PowerM function is making an API call to the Azure Cognitive Services. This is where I have entered the API key and the API endpoints. And as you'll notice, I'm showing you the API key over here, but as soon as this session is done, I will regenerate the API keys in the Azure Portal. So that's one way to safeguard your API keys. If you unintentionally or intentionally have revealed your API keys. So this particular function is for extracting key phrases, and then the next function is for extracting sentiment scores. So we are going to create those two functions in Power BI Query Editor. Let's do this one at a time. Save this and right click, rename, and let's call this get key phrases. Okay, so we have this, and we are going to now add the second function in there as well. It looks a little bit different from the last time I opened Power BI, but they keep adding things to Power BI. So I'm going to go back to, let's close this. Close and apply. Okay. And I'm going to go through the get data blank query menu one more time. And use my second function, text over here, to add the sentiment score function. So copy this, paste it in this text box, and rename this query to get sentiment scores. Okay, so now we have our functions ready. The next thing that you would want to do is to add columns to invoke these functions. So before we can do that, let's do a close and apply. All right, so our functions have been added. Now let's make some columns where we can store the values from calling these functions. So new column, right click on that new column. Oops. Okay, it did not like that. Let's try this again. New column, right click. Oh man, looks like it simply does not want me to create new columns. Interesting. This is where I forgot to pray to the demo gods before this session started. So I am suffering from that. Okay, so let's go to the query editor, because there are multiple ways to do pretty much the same things in Power BI. So for some reason, if this section does not work for you, you should be able to launch the query editor again and then go to the add columns button. Going into the add columns, click on your dataset So team held raw dataset, and that should enable the functions in this ribbon for invoking the custom functions. So we are going to click on invoke custom function over here, and that should allow us to make a call to the new function that we created. And this new column name, it's asking us, where do you want the output of this new function to go? So I want this output to go into a new column called key phrases. And next, in the function query drop-down box, so the drop-down box for some reason is disabled for me. Let's try this one more time. All right, looks like it doesn't really like me today. I am going to do the close and apply one more time to see if that helps. Okay. Let's try this again, guys. Okay, add column, invoke custom function. Nope, looks like it simply does not like me today. Okay. Maybe it's because of this query. Okay, let's delete that query. Give this one last try. If it does not work this time, I might go to the previously created demo section, and we might just have to assume that you guys trust me that this usually works the way I'm trying to show it to you. Okay, looks like it has decided that it does not want to work today for whatever reason. So we are not going to waste too much time trying to make this guy work. Do you want to apply your changes? Yes. Okay, so let's switch over to the Power BI dashboard that I had previously created. And I'm again going to go to the data section. And in this data section, you'll notice that there are three additional columns, key phrases, sentiment scores, and sentiment score bins. So if things work the way I was showing you, what you guys would have done is new column, right click, edit query, add column, invoke custom function. And you notice how in the drop down list, you see the key phrases and the sentiment score functions here. So I'm going to call this new column KP1, and to the function query drop-down list, you select key phrases, and next it is asking you which of the text columns you want to use as an input to the function. So let's select our responses column, hit OK. It's going to think for a minute and give you a preview, and then repeat this step for the sentiment score. So I'm simply going to call it SC1, and from the drop-down list, select your sentiment score function query. Again, in the text, use your response field as the input. Click OK. All right, so now you notice here that all of the previews are done. So let's hit close and apply. And this is going to do its processing, and it's going to create the two new columns. It's going to reach out to the Azure Cognitive Services APIs. Load those columns. Aha, I think I know why. Because after the last demo, I had changed the API keys. So I need to change those API keys over here. Bear with me for just a minute while I update the API keys over. And let's do the same for the sentiment score function as well. You don't really need a new query. Delete. If you notice the messages down here, it's waiting for Azure Cognitive Services to respond. This is again where if you're not very sure what it's doing, you can always go into the portal and you can look at the activity against your Azure Cognitive Services APIs. So in my case, I am going to go into the previously created I'm not going to go into the try-pass demo cognitive service because I did not use that one. I used the Sanil Text Analytics cognitive service. So let's go into that and okay. Let's go into the monitoring section and look at the metrics. So let's set the metrics for total transaction, and now you should see a big spike, and there it is. Is this No, this is the spike from where I was trying out the demo earlier. So let's see what's happening to our demo over here. It's still waiting. Oh well, sometimes the demo gods just decide to be unhappy with you, and demos don't exactly work the way they are intended to be. But if it had worked exactly the way it was intended to be, you would see a big spike. Maybe all is not lost. I see a small spike starting over here. So maybe it's running. It's just running a little bit slower than expected. Oh, 199 rows loaded. It's getting there.
Guess we just have to be a little patient. Oh, yeah,
Yep.
there you go.
Yep, it is doing its job. Well, I'm a millennial and I'm used to instant gratification, so I tend to be impatient. My apologies. All right, so looks like it is doing its job. It's just doing it tediously slow. Okay, so while we wait for that to finish, are there any questions about the things we covered so far?
If there are any questions in chat, now is the time. There is about a 20-second delay between when this gets broadcasted and when chat officially hears it. So there's a little bit of a delay in their ability to react. But that's why I'm vamping right now, to give them a moment to furiously type to get their questions in.
Okay. So looks like
there is a question
the
in here.
calls are finished. Awesome. Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, is there any difference in doing text analytics via the approach shown in this demo versus using the text analytics button in Power Query's editor window?
Yes. So it's all about the money. Those functions are premium functions. So if your organization has paid for a premium subscription, you should be able to directly use those buttons within Power BI. But if, like my organization, you don't have any of the premium features, then this is an approach that anyone can use. You can basically simply sign up for a free Azure subscription, and you can download Power BI free and do all of this at a small scale, of course, at zero cost. But if your organization has paid for premium features, go ahead and use it.
Makes sense. And Mala actually has a follow-up question, which is pretty close. How much does the thing cost on a monthly basis?
Yes. So let me show you the pricing tiers. And that is an excellent question. So what you pay for depends on the pricing tier that you subscribe for. So here's the pricing tier. Standard tier is one level above free. So if you go all the way to the right hand side, you'll see the free tier. It's $0 per month because it's free, but they cap you at 5,000 API calls every 30 days. The next tier that you can pay for is the standard tier, and it will cost you 30 cents per 1,000 calls. This used to be about 10 cents cheaper the last time I gave this demo in 2019. So it looks like inflation is catching up with Azure. And then you can obviously see all the other pricing tiers. The kind of workloads that my company runs, we use this quite heavily for survey data analysis. And we so far have been able to do everything we need using the S0 standard tier, which allows you 25,000 API calls per 30 days, and it costs just under $75 per month. Does that answer your question, Mala?
It does answer the question. Thank you.
All right. So let's move into the next section of the demo. And thank you again for bearing with me while the demo gods had decided to frown on this session. But looks like we were able to get to some compromise where I have duplicated the columns in a previously created demo. So you have your KP1 column where all of the key phrases have been extracted. And then we have our SC1 column where the sentiment score have been extracted. So what I would like to do here is just round off the sentiment score column. Not just round it off, actually, let's change its data type as well, because you'll see by default, Power BI has decided that the data type is text. It's obviously not a text, it's a fixed decimal. Let's click OK for the data type change. And it's not a currency, it is a decimal number. And we want the precision to be at 2. So by default, it has set it to 2. So that's great. And there you go. You now have your key phrases and your sentiment scores extracted and rounded off for use. Before I go into the dashboards, I want to show you one more backend trick that you will need before you start building your dashboards. And that is to create groupings from the sentiment score. And these groupings are going to be useful for you to create a type of chart called the histogram. So SC1, all the way on to the right hand side, click on the ellipsis next to SC1, and that will bring up some options. And scroll down and click on the new group option. This new group option is going to bring up a screen that allows you to create bins from sentiment scores. So over here, I know that the range of the sentiment scores goes from 0 to 1, 0 being the most negative and 1 being the most positive. So I want to create 10 bins that are equal size, and the size that I want to provide is 0.1. So I'm not going to depend on the recommended size over here. I am going to set the bin size to 0.1, and let's click OK. So this adds a new column called SC1 bins, and you'll notice now for the very first row where the sentiment score was 0.91, SC1 bin now shows a value of 0.9. So basically your entire range has been transformed into 10 buckets. All right. So now the data is prepared. Most of your data engineering and data science, well, I should say citizen data science work is done. And we are now ready to build dashboards. Before we build any of the dashboards, any questions so far about the pseudo data science and data engineering work that we covered so far?
Let's see if there are any questions. So far, none yet.
All right. So it's been about 50 minutes since I started talking. So let's jump into the dashboards. But feel free to stop me anytime. These dashboards are relatively easy to create in Power BI So I'm not going to go into the step-by-step demo of creating each and every dashboard. I'm going to talk more about what are the kind of insights that you can draw from all of these dashboards and visualizations. So first up is this entry page, this summary page. And typically, it's good to give your users some high-level information about the data set that you're going to analyze for them. So up at the very top, you see some very basic card type of visualizations in Power BI that show you how many teams data did we analyze for in this dashboard, how many managers were present here, how many responses did we analyze total, and then all the way on the right hand side, you'll notice some slicers for dimensions like periods, teams, and managers. In the middle, you will notice that there is word cloud. So I am a Tableau user as well as a Power BI user, and I'm not a big fan of creating word clouds in Tableau because they make you jump through multiple hoops. But with Power BI, I really like the fact that you can go to uh, the Power BI marketplace and simply download and install the word cloud custom visual. So that's what I have done here. I have installed the word cloud visualization. And when you drag and drop this word cloud visual, excuse me, when you drag and drop the word cloud visualization on your board, you would simply need to add the key phrases column into the category section, and it literally builds the visualization for you. You don't have to do any significant customization. Out of the box, the visualization is ready for you. You might discover that you do want some control over how the word cloud visualization is displayed. So, to exercise that level of control, you can go into some of the format sections. And typically, the control that I find terribly useful is this top word section. So, in the visualizations menu, once again, under formats, go to stop words, and you'll notice that I have switched on stop words. What this means is all the words in the English language that don't necessarily have a lot of value in terms of meaning are eliminated. If you switch this off, you might notice that the word cloud changes and you will see words like off, which don't really have a lot of meaning in the language, but they are the most frequent words. So you would want to eliminate words like that by enabling the stop words feature. You can also add custom stop words. So these are space separated, and over here I have added the custom stop words of health, team, and S. Uh, In this particular survey question, we are talking about team health. So most people use the terminology or the words team and health in the response itself, but it doesn't really add too much value, but it shows as the biggest and the boldest words in the word cloud. So you would want to eliminate those. But once you have done that, uh, the word cloud is pretty self-explanatory. The word cloud is pretty, but it's typically not terribly useful in terms of what kind of insights you can draw from it. But I have always noticed that executives are terribly impressed when you show them a word cloud. So I show them a word cloud. Okay, so the slicers on the left hand side. You can filter this word cloud by period. So let's say I want to see what are my teams talking about in 2019 Q2. Let's just select that filter, and you'll notice now the word cloud has changed. It's only showing you the words that appear in the period 2019. And it's pretty much the same way how all. That is not what I was intending to click on. I was intending to click on all. Okay. Looks like it does not want to cooperate with me. Oh, this all is not belonging to the same cluster. That is why. Never mind. I feel silly now. Okay. So shift and click, and you can select all the periods again. And you can apply similar filters on the teams if you want to see what does team 1 care about or what does team 9 care about, and then apply the same things for managers, because multiple teams might have the same manager, and you might want to see how things shape up when you want to look at things that a particular manager's teams care about. So that's your word cloud. This is the qualitative part of the analysis. The next part of the analysis is going to use the sentiment scores that were generated from the text, and we are going to do some line charts and some bar charts. Before we dig into that piece, any questions about the word cloud or this page of the dashboard?
No questions. Had a comment there about how all word cloud looks the same.
Yep.
It does often seem that way, yeah.
Yeah, and that is exactly what I mean by the fact that in terms of its information density or in terms of the value, I personally don't find the word cloud to be terribly valuable, but for some reason executives are thoroughly impressed with word clouds. So give the people what they want.
Yep. But it looks like no questions.
All right. So let's switch over to the next page, which is going to be the starting of the quantitative analysis. So we looked at the fact that from the responses, we generated sentiment scores. What do you want to do with those sentiment scores? The first thing that I looked at is trending over period. So on the top left, you see the sentiment score. Average of sentiment score is plotted over period of time. Um, what I would interpret from this chart is between Q3 of 2018 to Q1 of 2019, um, the IT department of my company has done things so that the developers feel happy. Maybe everyone got a raise, maybe everyone got a bonus, or maybe they got rid of a manager who was not terribly great. I don't really know what exactly happened, but you can tell that something has happened which has caused the average sentiment score to increase over the past 3 quarters. And then you notice Q2 of 2019, where it's not exactly flattened out, but it has had a slight drop. So maybe that happiness has reached its plateau, and people are expecting that happy state to be the new normal. So this is an interesting analysis that you can do simply by plotting the average of sentiment score over time. The next one is a bar chart, and the managers in our department kind of have a grudge against me for creating this bar chart, because it looks like I am stack ranking the managers and making them compete against each other. But this chart kind of shows you the average sentiment score distributed across managers. So you'll see that for all of the feedback that was received uh, under manager 1, the average sentiment score is 77% positive. For manager 2, it's 68% positive. For manager 3, it's 79% positive. So they're fairly close, but it looks like manager 3 is doing something uh, really well, and his or her team seems to be really happy and they seem to be enjoying great health. So maybe manager 1 and 2 can talk to manager 3 and try to learn from his or her success. The next chart to look at is the average sentiment score by team. And I have sorted this by the highest sentiment score to the lowest. So team 4 is all the way on top, and their average sentiment score is 0.86, so 86% positive. All the way at the bottom, you'll notice that team 5 has an average sentiment score of 67% positive. It means that team 4 is doing something right, and they are experiencing great team health, and maybe team 5, team 6, team 3 can learn from the success story of team 4. Maybe team 4 belongs to manager number 3. We'll need to talk to an analyst to find that out. Right. Any questions, comments, or thoughts about the basic bar charts and line charts that we have been through so far?
Any thoughts from chat? One person pointed out that peak happiness happened in 2019, which given 2020 is probably true. It's all
That
downhill
is
from
a great.
Q1.
That is an interesting observation, though I would like to counter that with real life data. So, uh, internally within our company, we obviously have kept doing this throughout 2020 as well. And surprisingly, peak happiness happened at the end of 2020. So the sentiment scores just kept going up throughout the pandemic.
Huh.
I guess IT folks don't care about the pandemic, but at least when it comes to team health, it seems that the pandemic is not impacting team health.
Oh, it's because everybody got to work from home.
Yes, that is true. So in real life, there are a lot of interesting insights that we can draw from this. Um, uh, one of one of the conversations that this is driving in my company is the fact that people seem to be happier and people seem to be equally productive, if not more, working from home. So should we have a permanent work from home policy? So that's an interesting conversation happening right now. And our executives are looking at these dashboards to help them shape those conversations and decisions. Okay, so let me switch over to the next type of analysis. The first chart that you see on the top left of this team is count by responses or count of responses by team. This is a very important number or a very important facet or dimension to make a note of, because you might want to check if the team that had the highest sentiment score in the past or in the previous section, team 4 had the highest sentiment score and team 5 had the lowest. So let's look at the counts, and you want to see, does team 4 have really few team members, and thus team 9, which has the least sentiment score, does it have the highest number of team members? Because the number of people responding can also have an impact on what those responses look like. Uh, Typically, in teams that are really small, sentiment scores tend to be higher. In teams that are large, the sentiment scores tend to be lower. So it's really important to look at the team size as well. Uh, the same is true for managers. So previously, I was talking about the fact that manager 3 seems to have the highest sentiment score, and maybe manager 1 and 2 could learn from his success story. But it's quite possible that manager 3 has the highest sentiment score because he is managing a team of only 4 people. And this poor guy, manager 1, is managing a team of 120 people. So it's really important to look at multiple facets of the data before jumping to conclusions. So on that note, I want to show the histogram. The histogram uses the bins that we had previously created. So on the x-axis, you see the bin, and on the y-axis, you see the count of responses that fall in that particular sentiment bin. And you'll notice here, this distribution is somewhat polarized. So you will see there are a lot of responses on the right end of the spectrum, and then some responses on the left end of the spectrum, and the middle is mostly empty. So the way I like to think about it is like a Yelp review or an Amazon review. If you are just satisfied with the restaurant that you ordered food from or the Amazon product that you ordered, you'll typically not take the effort of writing a review. But if you really like something that you ordered, or you are thoroughly unhappy with your experience at a restaurant, you would go on Yelp or you'll go on Google and write a bad review or a good review. So the way I like to translate that into survey analysis is the fact that people who take the time and effort to write a response to an open-ended question have something to say, and they feel passionately about that. And that passion can either be strongly positive or strongly negative. And that's what you see represented in this histogram as well. As with the word cloud, all the bar charts, all of the line charts, as well as the histogram can be filtered from here on theme as well as on manager. So what do you guys think about this analysis? Any questions, any comments, any thoughts?
Let's see what people have to say about this. Very useful tool. Great process.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no questions, then I will switch over to the next chart, which is a box plot.
Oh, there is one quick question. Is it reproducible, easily reproducible each quarter?
So the question was, is it easily reproducible each quarter?
Yeah, or each business period.
Okay, yeah. So the way I'm showing you how this is done in Power BI is not typically how you would go about operationalizing this in production. This Power BI approach of embedding API function calls is great for doing ad hoc analysis. But when you want to operationalize this in production to run on a quarterly basis for this application, or maybe you want things to run on a daily or a weekly basis for some other applications, like in my company, we use this to analyze our Twitter data feed, and that runs on a nightly basis. So we don't use Power BI for it. Uh, we have an ETL tool called Oracle Data Integrator, and we make API calls to Azure Cognitive Services from that ETL tool. And the responses are stored in a database table. And I know this is a SQL Server group, so don't throw rotten eggs at me. But my company is an Oracle shop, so we use an Oracle database and we use the Oracle Data Integrator as our ETL tool. Not my fault, just the environment that I'm in.
Get them.
So, so if your company is a Microsoft shop, a SQL Server shop, it's really easy to operationalize these API calls using SQL Server integration services or using Azure Data Factory. Uh, if your organization has a data science practice, I would even recommend not using Azure Cognitive Services and simply building models in R or Python to generate sentiment scores and extract key phrases and do these things on-prem. But each of these approaches require a certain level of operational expertise in terms of software engineering knowledge or IT operations knowledge and investment in infrastructure. And what I'm showing here is how somebody who doesn't have a lot of technical knowledge, who doesn't have programming skills, can quickly do this ad hoc. It was kind of a long answer, but I hope um, I answered the question.
Yeah. Another question here. Shouldn't we normalize the data for comparison purposes?
Yes, you could. This is just the basic. You can definitely normalize the data for comparisons. In fact, um, are you guys familiar with a product called Qualtrics? I'm not going to wait for
I'm
responses.
personally not.
But Qualtrics is an online uh, survey administration and survey analytics toolset, and they provide you with these natural language processing features as well. And they take this approach where they will provide you industry benchmarks so that you can compare the responses that you have received on your particular survey against industry wide benchmarks in either your subject matter, like your industry, your geography, or maybe even the type of survey that you're trying to conduct. So, yes, when you're doing comparisons, normalization is important.
Great. Thank you. Apparently, one of the people in chat is very familiar with it, but I wasn't.
Yeah, it's a really good tool for administering and analyzing surveys. All right, so the next visualization that I'm going to show is the box and viscous plot. For the box and viscous plots as well, I have simply gone to the marketplace and downloaded the box and viscous chart. So you click on it. So we want to compare this data across teams. So On the left-hand side in the visualizations pane, you'll notice that under category, I have dragged and dropped the teams column. Under sampling, I have the period, and then the values are the average of sentiment scores. And the values column is what's going to show up on the y-axis. So you'll notice the y-axis has a range that maxes out at 0.1. And then on the x-axis, you have the teams that go from team 1 all the way to team 9. I'm not going to explain the box and viscous plot from a statistical perspective, but I'm going to explain it from a layman's perspective. Um, there are folks like Kevin who would be much better at explaining it than I am from a purely statistical perspective. But this is how I explain the box and viscous chart to my manager or to executives. So I typically tell them that take a look at the size of the box, how tall or how short is the box, and then take a look at where does the box sit along the y-axis. Is it sitting really high up on the y-axis? Is it in the middle, or is it all the way to the bottom? And based on the size and the placement of the box, we are going to be able to draw some conclusions. So let's look at team number 5. The box for team number 5 is really tall. What that means is the members of team number 5 are experiencing the health of the team differently from each other. There are some members in the team who experience the team health extremely positively. Some team members experience it neutral, and then there are other team members who are experiencing the team health poorly. And that is the reason why the height of the box or the size of the box is tall. If you switch over to team number 6, you'll notice that the box is really short. And that's because the team members are all experiencing the health of the team in the same way. So that's a conclusion to draw from the size of the box. So next, you want to draw some conclusions on the placement of the box along the y-axis. So let's take a look at team number 4. You'll notice that their box is sitting pretty high up on the y-axis, and the size of the box is also short. So what this means is that not only are all the team members experiencing the health of their team in a similar way, but that experience is positive as well. And that's why the box is short and it's sitting high on the y-axis. I'm going to come back to team number 6, and you'll notice how this box is sitting relatively low on the y-axis. We already talked about the fact that this box is short, and it sitting low on the y-axis means that everyone on the team is experiencing the health of the team in a similar negative way. It's not totally negative because you see that it's nowhere below 0.5. It's still in the 0.7 section, but it's negative compared to team number 4. So without really knowing too much about statistics or even some of the relatively basic statistical concepts like mean, medium, quartile, so on and so forth, these are some of the conclusions that you can draw from a box and viscous plot. Any questions, comments, or thoughts so far?
None in chat. That's a good explanation of the box plot.
Thank you. I learned to start giving this simple explanation after trying to explain the box and Viscous plot to our VP of IT, and I saw that he was really bored after about a couple of minutes. I learned that I need to quickly change my strategy. Okay, so the next visualization I'm going to show is the details page. And this is where, after going through the first few pages of visualizations, your user, your HR analyst, or your manager might now be interested in taking a look at what are the most positive comments that they see in the team health for their particular team, maybe in the latest quarter. So, to facilitate that kind of quick slicing and dicing so that your users can get to the data that they are interested in, you would create these slices on the left hand side on period, team, and then on the sentiment score bins. So over here, let's see what are the most positive comments for team 1 in the period of 2019 Q2. And over here, the manager of this team can quickly take a look at what are those most positive comments. If that manager wants to now take a look at what are the most negative comments, simply change this filter to the range or the sentiment score bin of 0, and you will be able to read quickly what is the most negative response. So this allows your users to quickly get to the data that might be of interest to them. So nothing fancy about this visualization. The last visualization that I'm going to show you is about embedding R scripts into Power BI. While that loads, are there any questions?
No questions in here.
Okay. All right. So the R script that I have prompts the user for an input file. So this is the input file prompt, and I'm going to go into my demos folder and give it the input file. And it's going to create a visualization for us. This visualization is based on emotion classification. So I'm going to go to the slide where we talk about that particular visualization. All right. So NRC is National Research Council of Canada. They created an emotion lexicon, which is basically a list of words and the association of those words with 8 basic human emotions. In R, you can import the Shuzet package, and the Shuzet package has get NRC sentiment functions that implements the NRC emotion lexicon. There are libraries in Python that implement the get NRC sentiment function as well. So it's not just R specific. You can do the same thing in Python as well. But let's take a quick look if our R script has run. Yes, our R script has run. And let me click on this. So when you click on this visual, you'll notice that the R script editor has popped up at the bottom of the screen. So that's where you can put your R script. How do you create this particular page? So you will notice under visualizations, there is an R script viz and there is a Python viz. Just simply drag and drop these on an empty pane, and then you can put any script you want in the language of your choice, R or Python, and then execute that script, and it creates these beautiful graphs and charts for you. This is extremely useful to create visualizations that are not available out of the box in Power BI, or maybe are not available in the Power BI marketplace. You can be as simple or as complex with your R and Python scripts as you like. When it comes to Power BI Desktop, note that this uses R or Python installed on your local machine. For these visualizations to run on the Power BI server, it would need access to R or Python installation on some server. So make a note of that in case you're planning to embed R and Python visuals in Power BI, that they have to be backed by R or Python installed somewhere. It's not running self-contained within Power BI Desktop or on Power BI server. So what conclusions can you draw from this chart? So what this chart is telling us is, all the way at the top, you see the emotion of trust on the x-axis, and on the y-axis, it's telling you the percentage of this emotion in the total body of text. So the emotion of trust was found about 40% in the body of text. Then next is the emotion of joy, and it keeps going down all the way down to disgust, which was found in about 1% of the body of text. So just a very basic visualization, but rather than having to do something like this separately, you can embed it in Power BI. So I think that is pretty much it for the demos. Any questions about the last two visualizations before we go back to the slide deck and wrap up today's talk?
So if there are any questions, drop them into chat, forward them along. So far, it's looking like no questions.
All right. So with the NRC sentiment in our demo, that's it for the meat of the talk today. Thank you, everyone. You can always reach out to me on Twitter or on email, and I'm happy to answer any questions outside of the context of this chat as well. Thank you again. It's a list of
Wonderful.
resources. Right, I will stop sharing my screen and hand it back to Kevin.
All right. Thank you so much for the presentation. If there are any last second questions, now is a great time to get them in. And otherwise, give you a quick update on the schedule for TriPass over the next couple of weeks. We will have Shop Talk next Monday, and then it'll be a new month. So for March, we'll have our sessions set up. I believe they are not up on Meetup yet, but they'll be up soon enough. Second, third, and fourth Tuesdays of March. And it looks like even with that little bit of vamping, no questions. So I think you're off the hook for tonight, Sanil.
All right. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, TriPass user group. It was a lot of fun talking to you guys. Thank you for the great questions.
Much appreciated. Thank you. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Triangle Area SQL Server User Group.